Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to have got this opportunity to just share what I'm going to contribute to this August gathering during the day. At the outset, I'm once again thankful to Beatrice, who has spearheaded this event, and being part of the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, she coordinates the Africa chapter. While coming straight to introduction, I am a PPP consultant based in India, Delhi. I am also heading a transport sector team at UNEC Geneva, where we had released standard for railway PPPs last year, November, and I am also part of the executive committee of World Association of PPP Units and Professionals. Making PPPs workable at all levels, not only for mega projects, is my theme for the day, and I'm going to talk about something like micro PPP, which you can draw the analogy with the small and medium enterprise. When you go in detail, you would find that most of the big economies today sustain because the SME sector, small and micro enterprise sector, is thriving, and that's where the entire GDP is coming out from. The PPPs are usually associated with mega projects, but if we can scale them down by integrating various tools, whether it is ICT, whether it is procurement through Swiss challenge, or many other innovations, which could be geography specific, which could be local sensitivity based, it can make things workable beyond the main urban centers in tier 1, tier 2 cities, or even rural areas. So that is going to be my endeavor, to share the knowledge and my research on that. Thank you very much. Thank you, and wish you all the best.
I'm going to miss Mr. Ziad Alexandra Hayek. He's the president of the World Association of Public-Private Partnerships. Of course, he will speak to us a little later. Let me just go straight to Mr. Chidi. Mr. Chidi is from Nigeria. He's also one of the speakers at this conference. Mr. Chidi, if you can come and give some introductory remarks.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of my fellow Nigerians here. So I'd ask the Nigerians here all to please stand up for recognition. All the Nigerians. I think we're about, I think about 12 of us. Yeah, well, thank you very much. The first thing I just want to say is that I want to thank Beatrice and Uganda, for putting this together. And you can't find a more resilient African or more resilient infrastructure or more resilient person like Beatrice. Can we give Beatrice a round of applause, please? I think one of the key things I made yesterday was this issue of trying to learn from one another. It's very key to me. Don't reinvent the wheel. When you copy and paste, it's imitation. Don't do that. If you copy, mix and paste, what is it? Innovation. So we just need to sort of innovate around and build our society. Speaking here in my capacity as not just a Nigerian, but also the co-president of the African PPP network, and I encourage everybody to join the network so that we can grow it, to create value for all Africans. I also want to invite you to something we're doing in Nigeria. I mean, when Ms. Aiko spoke here, infrastructure is not gender neutral. Infrastructure deficit disproportionately affects women. So we are launching an initiative with the support of the Australian government to strengthen women participation in PPPs. You know, our First Lady is doing it. It starts on the 2nd of October at the Transcorp Hilton in Abuja. So all of you are very welcome. So let's do that. I mean, the issues are around the lack of equity, the lack of water and stuff like that. Let us have gender responsive infrastructure focused on the SDGs. That's what that initiative is about, and we started on the 2nd of October. The last thing I want to talk is that I think many of us here feel we are not strong enough to change Africa. I truly believe, because Frantz Fanon says, every generation must out of relative obscurity discover her mission, fulfill or betray it. We are the infrastructure generation. We can and we will. And if you think you're too small to make a difference, when you go back tonight, try sleeping with a mosquito. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidi. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon you, Namba, to kindly just give some introductory remarks. You are one of our speakers at the conference.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I was not expecting to come up on the podium, so I'm very feeling nervous and also feel humble to be here. Good morning. My name is Yu Namba. I work for Toyo University in Japan. We specifically doing the works to help local governments to implement actual PPP projects in Japan and especially in Asia. And this is actually my only second time to be in Africa, whole continent. So I would like to extend my gratitude to Beatrice. She's not here right now, but to make me come to this conference. What I'm speaking tomorrow, and specifically on how and why PPP is important at the local level, because this is where people live, this is where actual projects are, and this is what we really need to focus on the people first. And I'm not going to take much long time, but usually it is very difficult to implement PPP projects in local level because the legislation is not necessarily written for the local level. They don't have the capacity, they don't have the money, they don't have the people who can pay for the services. So we have to find a right person or right institution, and so that the actual project can actually go through. So I'm going to talk about those kind of things. And also, it is important, especially at the local level, to find a champion who can actually lead the project to get through. And I think in Uganda, you have Beatrice, you have so many people who are here in the conference, not in Uganda itself. We have Tanzanian, we have Nigerian, we have Kenyan, we have a lot of people who are in this conference, and they can be a champion in their country or in their ministry, in their department, or in their jurisdiction to actually lead the project to get through. And we actually value these personal the connection or the personal, the people factor is quite important for the PPPs to actually happen. And also, we need to institutionalize these effort of these individuals, and so that this is something that we can have. We can share the knowledge, we can share the experiences. There are good experiences, bad experiences all over the world, and let's try to learn from each other in next 2 days, so that we can actually build upon each other's experiences to make it better. Thank you very much.
At this juncture, I'd like to call upon another of our speakers, Council Shinobi, please, from Norton Rose.
Thank you. My name is Brian Shanubi. I work at Norton Rose Fulbright. I'm also affiliated with Shanubi Musoke and Company Advocates here in Uganda. And as of yesterday, I was one of the few Ugandans to speak here. you and me, Jane. So I'm honored to be here on home ground representing my country, but I'm also honored to speak alongside other Africans. I think one of the most important things that's happening in Africa at the moment is the Africa Free Trade area. That's an important thing. Africa currently trades more with Asia and Europe than it does with itself. And I think PPPs are a vehicle through which we can achieve greater inter-Africa trade and start to serve more of our people, reach more of our people with services. So I think this union of Africa that we see here with people from Malawi, from Nigeria, from Zambia, from all over the place is important in expanding that idea of inter-Africa trade and free trade within Africa. More and more countries are ratifying this agreement and it's becoming law locally, but we need the mechanics and the infrastructure to actually execute this free trade. So well done to all of you for coming here and taking this seriously. Thanks, Beatrice, for inviting me. It's always an honor to be here in my home country, contributing in my small way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brian. And I think something that you touched on that's very important is the fact that we will be looking at African unionization. We will be also talking about how important the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is and the fact that it must be ratified by many who haven't yet done so. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon Mr. Martin Rauch to also say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the conference yesterday and also had an opportunity to take some rest as well. It's an honor for me to be here. I'd also like to thank Beatrice for the invitation. I'd also like to thank Jane for the delightful way she puts us on the spot here and has been managing this conference as master of conference, as a master of ceremony. So yesterday I had the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about the SAVI tool, the Sustainable Asset Valuation Tool, which is an valuation methodology to compare projects, to plan a PPP or an infrastructure project in advance. And the goal of that tool is to get it right. A PPP, as has been said here by several colleagues, is a tool to get to infrastructure. It's a tool to provide services that are needed by the communities here in Africa, here in Uganda, and neighboring countries. And the importance of the discussions here, the way I see them, the importance of our conversation, the goal that we should have here is to get these PPPs right. It's to focus on sustainable development for Uganda, for Tanzania, for Kenya, for Africa. It's our focus here. It's to plan accordingly to get to the results that we want. The economic tool that I shared yesterday is one way to get there, one way to plan the financial viability and the impacts and consider the risks and externalities that are involved in a PPP project, in an infrastructure project. And one thing that we didn't have an opportunity actually to focus on, or at least not to the extent that we wanted yesterday, is the other side of it, the contract, the PPP contract. So what I would like to do in this brief opportunity to address you here today is to highlight that the session that Motoko and I would have conducted yesterday on PPP contracts, for which we didn't have time, we will have it tomorrow, and we will look at contract clauses, what they do, what they don't do to achieve sustainability in infrastructure projects, and how they can be improved. So it's not only important to get the planning right from the economic side, from the economics perspective, but it's also important to get the deal right. How do these PPP structures can be formalized in a legal sense to actually deliver the results that we want for the people in Africa to have the infrastructure that they need to bring development to our countries. Thank you very much.
At this juncture, I'd like to call upon Ms. Audrey Mwala from the Africa PPP Network to kindly also give us her introductory remarks and also some of the sessions that she'll be talking on.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. I'm extremely glad to be here to share and learn. And I am heading the PPP unit in Malawi. And as I said yesterday to those of you who were here, I'm an expert in PPPs and a certified project finance specialist. But then, like David has said, the more you get these experiences and qualifications, the more you realize that there is more to learn. So it's an opportunity for me to come here and also learn from the things that are coming, that are shaping our future PPPs. One thing that I want to leave Uganda people with is the need to embrace the aspect of impact. Not just doing things for the sake of ticking the box, but now what exactly is the objective that we were trying to achieve and what impact has it brought? Every action that we have to do has got consequences, and it has direct and indirect impacts. For instance, in March this year, I was with Beatrix. We went to Australia. There was a presentation for the G20 on the role of women in infrastructure. It was a tight schedule, but then we still found time to sit and talk about how can we improve PPPs in Africa. And we agreed on some of the things that we should do. And one of the things we talked about is this conference. So I am so glad that what we had decided to do then when we met in Melbourne is actually here on the ground. But if you can see, when I talk about impact, it's not just about us coming together, but if you just have to think about it, what is the impact of our coming together here? You will realize that already our hotels have been affected positively. The airlines have been affected positively. We have been affected positively by the knowledge that we've come up to gain from here. We have networked. We have an opportunity to learn a lot of things that we didn't know before. And you see that just the action of bringing this PPP network, bringing people to this conference, has got impact in different areas. And that's the case that should be with the PPPs that we are implementing. And for every PPP that we implement, it's very important that we should look at what is the situation now, what is the problem now, what are the people looking for now, and what am I going to address. And we should track, it's very important to keep records of what difference we have made, because we are here to have people first, and we want to see how are we improving the quality of life. In our organization, our vision is to become the premier partner of choice, to build world-class infrastructure for improving quality of life. And for us to improve that quality of life, there is need to understand what is the quality of life today, and 5 years later, how have we improved? And that's why it is important to understand the impact, not just putting the infrastructure there, but what exactly are we doing? What kind of infrastructure are we putting in place? And who are the partners out there that are looking to partner with us? And that can only happen if we have excellence and knowledge, and we have the projects, and we'll find our partners coming to hold our hands. So that's something that I would also want to leave with the Ugandan people, that in terms of infrastructure development, let's think about impact, let's think about becoming a premier partner of choice that will attract partners to come, and let's think about building infrastructure that will stand the test of time, something that will look back 10, 20 years from now and say, I'm glad I was part of this infrastructure development. Thank you.
A special thank you to Mrs. Mwala, Audrey Mwala, for that. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon, yes, Mr. Honora, please. You're going to be a speaker at this conference. Just a quick introductory remark and what Ugandans should take away from this PPP experience.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having us here. Actually, I want to put a remark on the organization of this event and the effort behind this organization. And I'm really delighted and honored to be in a conference that I really believe and feel that I belong to this community and I belong to this event in Africa. I'm Atar Hanura, the head of the PPP Central Unit in Egypt. Our unit was established back 2006, and we have almost 14 years of experience in PPPs. However, in this 13, 14 years, Egypt went through a lot of events and experiences. We've got 2 revolutions, we've got political instabilities, we've got economical instabilities, and I can tell you that within this 13 years, we have all the events that happened or that could happen for any nation and affect the PPPs and affect the infrastructure. So we have some kind of impact experience in this PPPs. The good thing that I want to mention in Egypt that we took hold of the PPPs and we didn't drop it over this events and these revolutions and this instability that we went through. And currently we have went back to the PPPs, and actually there is a very high political support. The only thing that I want to advise, or I want all the PP units here to come out of this event with it, is it's very easy to know what to do in a PP. The things that I want to tell you is what not to do in the PPs. PPs sometimes fails because we do things that we shouldn't do. We, as mentioned before, sometimes we find the PPP project fails because we didn't take care of the procurement, the selection, the pre-qualification. We took a successful project from one country and we took the documents as is and we put it because our project is the same. This is, as mentioned before, cut and paste or copy and paste, never go. There's sometimes the project fails, excuse me for this, because there is a political pressure to do things that should not be done. We shouldn't respond to political pressure if this is against the scheme or the procedures or the system or the methodology of getting a project right. Thank you very much, and I've just noticed that a lot of PPs coming in the African continent, and this kind of hubs, we are be honored to join whenever we can. Thank you very much.
I'd also like to call upon Mr. Jean-Pierre Labouchon to also give us some introductory remarks, and he will also talk about some of the sessions that he will be appearing on.
Thank you. It's interesting how themes arise, and I think one of the themes that's very encouraging is the continued theme of learning. So as an African who's worked, lived and done many projects on this continent, I think what's always reassuring is everyone's trying to do better. Everyone's trying to learn. And so now I'm going to teach you 2 Swahili words. Yes, the Mzungu is going to teach you Swahili. Safari means journey. It doesn't actually mean going to a nature park. It means it's a journey. And I think all of us are on this safari to learn how to do this better. And the second word I'm going to teach you is fundi. It's a Swahili word for expert. And so I think while we're on this safari, we're trying to become fundis in PPPs and delivering projects, because at the end of the day, all of these projects, PPPs, whether they developed as a PPP or infrastructure projects, are about people. So it doesn't matter if it's a linear project from A to B or a grey concrete project. It's about a journey to learn to be an expert in delivering a project to improve the lives of people. And I think the learning theme and the people beneficiary theme are two strong themes that have come out on this safari to date. And I just hope that we all continue on our learning journey to become experts, to make sure that what we start, what we envisage, and what we deliver actually benefits at the people at the end. And I think there's a wealth of experience here. So there are many fundis in this room that we can all learn from to make our projects better and more efficient, to make sure that the end beneficiaries actually get what they want. And I think that's my role and contribution to this process. So yesterday I touched on briefly about some of the financial concepts. A bit later today I'll be talking about the impact of the Chinese Belt Road Initiative and its impact on delivering projects on the continent. So thank you for listening to me, and I'll talk to you again later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jean-Pierre. I'd also like to call upon Mr. Turner, Mr. Paul Turner. He also will be one of the key speakers at this conference. Mr. Paul Turner.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and I think I was possibly one of the first people Beatrice spoke to in the donor diplomatic community when she had this idea. And I mean, it's to credit to her that, you know, here we are from so many different countries on the continent as well as elsewhere here in this room, and it's actually making it happen. I will be giving a perspective from the UK on PPPs later this morning, and I think that, you know, what we want to impart to you is that in the UK we were one of the first countries that was doing PPPs, and we have seen the good, the bad and the ugly of it, and we want to be able to kind of share some of our experiences of PPPs, as well as obviously learn from other people as well. So I won't say too much now about that, but what I will say is that how heartening it is to kind of see so many people in the room from different PPP units and governments across the region and indeed wider. And I would also like to say that take this opportunity to actually build your networks. I was privileged enough to be at a PPP conference in Harvard just a couple of years ago, actually with Beatrice as well. And we had people from Latin America, from Eastern Europe, from Ukraine, and it was such a rich exchange of ideas and views. So all I can say is take that advantage, because you'll learn a lot from each other. And not just from people like us speaking at the front. Thank you very much.
Also, one of our speakers will be none other than the country director of the Africa Development Bank. And I know Mr. Kennedy Mbiakini is here with us. Mr. Kennedy Mbiakini, if you can come and give us some introductory remarks. I'd also like to recognize the arrival of Lieutenant General Angina from the Operation Wealth Creation. Operation Wealth Creation is one of the sponsors here, alongside DBSA, the Development Bank of South Africa, alongside Chira Motor Corporation. Can Mr. Mbiakini have a round of applause as he comes up, please, from the Africa Development Bank?
Thank you, Chair Lady and colleagues, distinguished colleagues. I also recognize the presence of Honorable Minister. Thank you so much. It's a great honor for the bank to be invited and to be participating here. I have other colleagues who are also coming from the energy side of the bank to also participate in the workshop. Actually, the invitation was for the president of the bank, who is unable to attend due to other commitments. So I was assigned to represent the bank but also being a country manager here, I'm also representing colleagues at the office. So it's a very important area, the PPPs. But as a bank, as you know, that our main objective is to ensure a reduction of poverty and sustainable economic development. So we come in with a balanced view. We fully understand that private sector is there to make profit, but government is there to protect the interest of the people. So there has to be a middle ground in terms of how we can really partner and partner also at the benefit of the people without constraining the profitability of the private sector. And some of the instruments and the interventions that the bank has been working on have been aimed at ensuring that there is a balanced approach in PPPs. So when we talk of the need to develop a legal and regulatory environment, it's a legal and regulatory environment to ensure that we are also protecting the citizens, but at the same time we are protecting the interest of the private sector. Because private sector, we know they have to make profit. But if the government doesn't have capacity, private sector can maximize the profit to the extent that it becomes detrimental to the government. So there is need for the government to also be able to fully understand. But for private sector, the plea is, in an environment where you feel that government doesn't have capacity, let's not overexploit, because what will happen is 5-7 years along the way, there will be somebody smarter coming in and reverse all the agreements that have been done. So in a day-to-day environment of negotiations, if, for example, I know that a house is going to cost 50 million Uganda shillings, and the old man in the house or the lady says, I can sell it to you at 1 million, and I indeed pay 1 million, I shouldn't be surprised if tomorrow the children come in and say that what you negotiated doesn't make sense, even though there's a legal agreement. So part of the problems we are seeing in a number of countries in terms of reversal, policy reversals, is because of how contracts were negotiated. There are countries, I know Zambia for sure, in the energy sector, they are what they call legacy contracts or grandfather contracts, where companies are paying tariffs almost zero for energy. So the new entrants have to pay the commercial tariffs. The old guys, because of grandfather clauses, they pay old tariffs. So that creates an even playing field, even for the private sector itself. So even for the private sector, they have to rethink their strategies and ensure some sense of social responsibility in how you're dealing with government. But government, let's work to improve your capacity so that you can engage robustly with the private sector. Because private sector is not coming to give handouts. They are there to make profits. But when you make profits so that you can even be able to sleep at night with the profit that you've made. If you make a profit that you feel that you can't sleep at night when a phone call comes, then you're in trouble. So where private sector feels that there is a problem in terms of capacity of government, let's work together even as private sector to help government build that kind of capacity. So from the bank side, we also provide technical assistance and transaction advisory services to the government especially, so that they can be able to negotiate. And we've been financing a number of PPP transactions, some of them successful, some of them near successful, some of them they are still there. But it's a learning process, as one area speaker, the gentleman said that every day he's learning something, and I think it's a learning process so that we keep learning. So I think these kind of forums are important to share experiences. For example, toll roads. I don't know whether we have colleagues from South Africa. Good toll road connecting Johannesburg and Pretoria. People don't want to pay. At the end of the day, it becomes government responsibility. So you can have a toll road if the tariffs or the engagement with civil society and the people is not effective enough, people are not going to pay, and the burden is on the government. So even when the tariffs are being negotiated, the private sector and the government have to reach middle ground, but I think the onus is on the government to build the capacity in order to negotiate sustainable tariffs. We had financing for Bujagali. The tariffs from the private sector point of view and the financiers made sense. But from the government point of view did not make sense, to the extent that the President, His Excellency Museveni, had to call the President of the bank that your tariffs don't make sense. So we had to renegotiate to extend the period so that we bring down the tariffs. The question that the President here was asking is, what use is electricity being generated when people cannot afford? So that's where the middle ground has to come in, and that's where institutions like Africa Development Bank, World Bank, they do come in. But I think the main message coming from ADB, because our interest is in our member countries, of course we have interest in private sector, but it's the issue of capacity building and exploiting the technical and advisory services that is available from the bank side. So we're looking forward to having to engage with colleagues here, to network with colleagues, and to see how we can partner in this initiative, which is very important because government finances are not enough to finance the huge backlog of infrastructure, especially infrastructure that is affecting ability of our people to be more productive. So as African Development Bank, we are ready to engage with colleagues in the private sector. We're also ready to learn from them where we can do better. Because sometimes we end up talking to ourselves in African Development Bank, but this creates an opportunity for us to get feedback from colleagues in terms of what other instruments we can bring in on the table, which we are currently not thinking about. So we're very grateful to the organizers for inviting us, and we are indeed very impressed with the turnout of the participants, the expertise, the diversity in the expertise, and that will show that we are going to indeed come up with better ideas in terms of how we can move the process forward. Thank you very much.
Special thank you to Mr. Kennedy Mbiakini. Mr. Kennedy Mbiakini is Country Director here in Uganda to the African Development Bank, and he was talking about the importance of financing and funding in PPPs, in the PPP space. At this juncture, of course, our Honorable Minister, Minister of State for Urban Planning and the Minister of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, Honorable David Bahati. You're most welcome, sir. Yesterday we had an intensive training on PPPs, and we would like to bring you up to speed with some of the discussions therein on matters to do with public-private partnerships. At this juncture, I'm going to call upon Council Bernard Oundo, first and foremost, just to give us a brief for the Minister on what Uganda should look out for on PPPs and some of the challenges we might face going forward. And then thereafter, we shall have also a few words from Madame Audrey Mwala, who happens to come from Malawi. She'll be giving us an experience, her experience and Malawi's experience on PPPs, and we can perhaps share those experiences. Without further ado, Council Bernard Oundo, please. He's an expert in PPP space here in Uganda.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Right Honorable Prime Minister, everyone else in your distinguished capacities, protocol observed. I'll just share our Ugandan experience, basically. Where are we in terms of PPPs? I think the starting point is the legal and institutional framework. I think the minister and the government, what they have done right is getting the PPP Act, the PPP regulations, the PPP guidelines. But most importantly, trying to learn from the experiences of other African countries. because as we develop the PPP Act and develop the PPP regulations, we're able to take the examples we had learned from Kenya, from Tanzania, from Zambia. Because if you look at these acts, if you look at, for example, the Kenya PPP Act and you look at the Ugandan PPP Act, they're almost similar. And if you look at the Zambian PPP Act, you have some sort of similar provisions. The question to my mind is, where do we go from here? It's good to have a good legal framework, and we have that. But without the projects, we're going to be able to do nothing. So we need to work on the project pipeline. If we don't work on the project pipeline, then we'll just have a good legal and institutional framework. And if you look at our project pipeline, I think the first project we have in this country is Kampala-Jinja Expressway, which has been carried out under the PPP Act and following the provisions of the PPP Act that was promulgated in 2015. But even with that, we're having challenges. I think some of us read in the news yesterday that there is talk about a Chinese investor, and I think as a country we need to be careful about policy reversals, and I think someone here was talking about policy reversals. Some of these things will greatly impact on our country as an investment destination. Because on one hand, you have a PPP Act, you have a process that is being followed. Once you have a process, then we should be able to commit to that sort of process. If investors start sensing that there may be some rules that are being carried out outside the process, then you're going to sort of have an impact on investor confidence in this country. But beyond it, my second thought really is, how do we actually carry out transformative PPPs? I'm just going to look at two issues, just two issues. One of the greatest things we have is unemployment of our youth. How do we ensure that right from the process, from the PPP inception, to PPP feasibility study, to the procurement process, we are actually reflecting on some of the challenges that we have, okay? If you talk about local content, and you talk about the development of our local industry, are we asking these investors during procurement to say, can you actually give us a local content plan? But do we even go ahead to actually monitor it at the time that the PPP is being carried out? So there are a few things that we need to think about as a country, but most importantly, how we actually carry out transformative PPPs. And for me, as a lawyer, the most important challenge we have, and if you look at the standard contracts that are shared, for example, if you look at the concession agreements, most of these agreements do not actually reflect that sort of transformative approach. And I think yesterday we were learning about building sustainable PPPs. Most of them do not actually reflect that sort of transformative approach. Now, it will be foolhardy for us not to learn from the challenges that we have and decide to copy and paste, like my brother said. But he said copy, mix, and paste. Okay? And that is the mixing. Okay? We have peculiar problems as a country, but these problems are similar across Africa. If you talk about unemployment, if you talk about the local content development, all these problems are similar across Africa. Can we be able to learn from each other? Take the best example of Kenya. In Kenya, they're developing about, I think, five roads under the PPP framework. In Uganda, we have the Kampala-Jinja Expressway, and I think there are about 3 other roads that will be done under the PPP framework. Are we learning from what has happened? Because in Kenya, I think they've already awarded one of the contracts. Are we learning from Kenya so that we are able to carry those processes as we go through our own procurement process? So I think for me, those are my thoughts on where we are in Uganda and just what we need to do. I think the emphasis for the Minister of Finance is we need that pipeline of projects. But for us to have that pipeline of projects, we need to build the capacity. And where is the capacity? The capacity will be in the PPP units, will be in people who have worked in the PPP units before. It will also be people in banks, those who are advising on some of these infrastructure projects. We need to strictly build capacity. But we also need to change the way we build capacity. Because you see, PPPs are not about just coming to class and learning and saying, okay, this is how you do value for money, and this is the public sector comparator. It has to be practical. If you don't do a project however many classes you come to, you will not be able to understand the concepts. So it has to be practical. Now, if UNRA, Uganda National Roads Authority, is carrying out for example, Kampala-Jinja Expressway, how are we ensuring that the other different stakeholders that are coming from other different government departments are also part of the process so that they're able to learn and share their experiences? Are we waiting that for the next project, if it's an energy project, again we'll start from scratch? Those are the things that we need to think about. Those are the things that we need to think about, I think, as a country. Thank you, Jen. I think I'm on a panel. I'm on some panel will share some thoughts then.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bernard Oundo, Honourable Minister. He's an expert, PPP expert here in Uganda Legal Council. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon Ms. Audrey Mwala. Ms. Audrey Mwala is an expert, very experienced in public-private partnerships. She's a very, very good presenter. She's able to break it down, all the laws and the acts about PPPs, the challenges faced with PPPs, and what Africa can do to make sure that they maximize on the already ongoing PPPs. So that's why we've asked Mrs. Audrey Mwala to speak and to explain, especially to Ugandans who are joining us currently live right now on NTV, which is a local channel here in Uganda, and for everybody else who's joining us around the world online. Just remember, you can also follow us on our hashtag. That is hashtag PPP Forum Africa 19. That's hashtag PPP Forum Africa 19. So if you're watching this at home, perhaps you're not a PPP expert, Mrs. Audrey Mwala will be able to explain it to you in a layman's language. Audrey.
Good morning once again. I like this idea of layman's language. So I will try to translate into a layman's language by saying that PPPs, we should look at PPPs as the need for development. We are, as government, having this great responsibility to develop the nation. And for us to develop the nation, we need to look at how we are going to put up the infrastructure that will address the needs of the people. How are we going to finance that infrastructure? And how are we going to provide the service that comes from the infrastructure efficiently to help the people get the needs, to meet their needs, other than just having the infrastructure as an end in itself. It's important to also understand that provision of public infrastructure is traditionally a government's responsibility. So PPPs is just an alternative form. So in other words, it doesn't take away the responsibility of government in making sure that there is provision of service, infrastructure development, but we are simply using an alternative form because government will not be able to do all things at the same time. As we said yesterday, the demand for infrastructure and the services is growing at a rate that's faster than the ability for government to meet that demand. You have urbanization, you have population growth, and you have challenges on government pace where the needs to allocate the resources are very, very low. I noted that we had improvement in the infrastructure through development aid in the past years, but the aid has also been dwindling, and yet at the same time, even the allocation for infrastructure development for the nations here in Africa, we are also going down. We are not allocating as much. So there is really need that there is a gap that needs to be financed, and that gap will be financed by private sector investment that will come in the play. So in terms of private sector investment, I just wanted to emphasize the point that it is the role of government to provide the service to the nation, and this we are doing it by getting the help of the private sector. So we are doing it as a partnership. If there is need for a hospital to be constructed somewhere, and there is need for a school to be constructed somewhere, and the government is only limited in that year to the funds that can do one of them, then you find that the hospital will be constructed, but maybe the school will have to wait because government has to do it next year in the next year's budget. But then when you have PPPs in place, you can leverage on the private sector financing to do the school while government is doing the hospital. And in the end, the country is able to have both. That's the beauty about the PPP. So it is a partnership where both sides will have to work and make sure that it is structured in a win-win transaction. The PPP has got a lot of risk allocation issues that you have to ensure that you don't just transfer or burden the private sector with all the risks and you get away. Actually, somebody said the best PPP deal is the deal where both parties leave the room very angry because none of them got everything that they wanted. So if you get that kind of a PPP contract where when you are going out of the room, you as an investor, you are smiling that you've ripped off government, or government is smiling that they've ripped off the investor, then that is bound to fail. Because this is a long-term contract. It takes about 30 years, sometimes 40. And in some cases, I heard about 90. I was horrified, but it does happen. So the point is, for something that is genuine, that is supposed to last for long, it has to be for the benefit of both parties. And let's remember, private sector is not charity. They are there to make their return. So they have to make a decent return, but at the same time, they should not make a return that rips off the government and the people, and that it has got no positive impact on the users. And that's why there is need for careful negotiation, proper capacity building. We talked about project finance yesterday. The need for the government to have the skills to understand those numbers. They come up with all those big volumes of pages. You have a lot of information. If you don't understand and if you don't read, you go in the negotiation room without understanding, the investors will just tell you things that will take away your attention. So I just wanted to say that PPP is different from privatization in a sense that with privatization, it was simply transferring an existing infrastructure from government to the private hands, with the aim of asking the private sector to improve on it, and also with the aim of making sure that the government is relieved of the need to run around and probably finance in operations in some cases. But then with private sector, so with privatization, the asset was there, so there was evidence. And as you can see, for you to sell something that is there, it's very easy. But with PPPs, it's what I call a faith-based marketing. You are trying to market a project just based on concept. And how many people can buy concepts? There are so many people that want to see what they are buying. So for you to go out there to convince somebody to put in their millions of dollars into something that they have never seen, you are just telling them a story. Selling a story is not easy. And especially, it's not easy if you haven't sold one before. Because for a company that has got, if a country that has got implemented PPPs before, it is a reference point when you are going forward. But at the beginning, when you have nothing, it's not easy. So you need a lot of faith to convince the investors, but you need to have a good story. You need to have a well-packaged story. You need to have the proper regulatory systems that will give confidence to the investors. So in terms of the investors, for us to attract them, we need to have proper legal and regulatory framework. We also need to make sure that we have the policies that are guiding, that will give them confidence. We also need to have the institutions. How is this going to be done? What institution, what is the process that I will follow, and which doors do I go? What institutions are there? We have to think about the capacity of the people. As I said, I have seen a lot of negotiation processes where you have maybe 10 people from the government side. Oh, one person has read the documents. The other 9 are just saying, yes, we agree, yes, we agree. That becomes a problem because you are selling away what you should have known. But for you to be able to go through those documents and pick the things that matter, you need capacity building. So it's important that we build capacity of not only the PPP unit, but also what I would call PPP nodes. PPP nodes are the different contracting authorities, the municipals, the different ministries. These are the generators of the project. Those have to understand what a PPP is, what project finance is, what risk allocation is. Then that will help them to build that capacity, that when they meet when they meet the investors, they understand what is there. We also have to think about the financial resources. For us to implement PPPs, we need to resource our institutions. Most importantly is the running of the institution, but also the funds to prepare projects. Because for us to go and tell a story, we need to show something that we would call a bankable project. And a bankable project, for it to become bankable, you need to invest in the skills that will tell the story that this project is economically and financially viable. You've looked at the legal framework and you think it's legally acceptable in the environment where you are. You don't just lift up a project that was done in another country. You find that the laws and the regulation in your countries are not allowing that kind of project. So you have to make sure that it's legally, you have to make sure that it's socially and environmentally acceptable. You have to make sure that it is affordable to the people that are going to use the project. So you have to look at the technical aspects of the project. Is this technically viable? So you have to look at all the key things that will make it viable. Market assessment. Do we have prospective buyers? Do we have the prospective investors and the buyers, the demand for this? Who is taking the demand? So you have to look at all those things, and they will form part of what you call a bankable document that could attract investment. Now, moving from the financial resources, we also have to know that for us to come up with the projects, we need to develop a pipeline of projects. It's easy to convince investors when you show them a list of potential projects that have the political will as well. That's very important. Another enabling environment, political will. We don't want to backtrack and start changing along the way. So when you have the list of projects that you want to do, that one is going to be your tool to sell PPPs to the investors, because it's expensive to handle PPPs. So if you want to do it in isolation, it's not economic. So you better look at a pipeline. And it also gives confidence to the investors that if I start working on one, there is a chance that in a few months' time, I'm going to have another one. So when they mobilize their team, they know that they are there for the long haul. So that becomes extremely careful. As you're doing your PPP pipeline, it's also important to think about the people-first principles, to understand what do the people need. It's not just a question of sitting down in your office and deciding, I'm going to put this infrastructure, but look out, what are the problems? Consultation is important so that you come out with projects that are acceptable. I know there was a project in Australia which was, they were putting a railway line which was passing through a graveyard. The technicians did the job and they looked at the engineers, they saw it can pass. But the people stood up and said, no, this is our graveyard and we are not going to allow our dead to be disturbed. I don't know how you disturb the dead, but they said, we don't want the railway line to pass here. It becomes a problem. I think someone has already talked about the South African case where the people protested to pay tolls. It was not easy for people to get to accept paying tolls when they were not ready to do that. I think in Egypt you also had a bridge where people were also bypassing. They didn't want to pay for the bridge. I think Nigeria you have Riki, do you call it Lekki or Riki? The toll road that government took back. How do you pronounce it? Lekki, yes, the Lekki toll road. It was protested. People didn't want to pay tolls. So it's normal. You have the green belt in America. The people actually choose to use a different route because there's an alternative. Why should I go and pay tolls? So oftentimes, maybe we put infrastructure that people didn't really need. So it's important that when we are coming up with the pipeline, we should understand that do people really need it? Secondly, is it affordable? And now that will help us to come up with what I would call a bankable project. Now, going forward, we have to understand this new concept of moving beyond value for money. At first, the focus was just comparing if we did this project using government resources compared to doing it with PPP, which one gives us better results. And the difference between the results from government, which were supposed to be they were supposed to be bad because of inefficiencies, delays. The private sector is supposed to be innovative. It's supposed to be positive. So that's what you call value for money. But now we are moving beyond value for money and including the aspect of value for people, where we are now looking at that partnership according to SDG 17. These should also take into account things that will engage people's interests first. You're looking at access. Do you provide access to the, do you are improving access to the majority when you put up this infrastructure? You're looking at the environment. Is this environmental responsive when you're putting up this infrastructure? How is it improving the lives? How is it inclusive? Is it leaving anybody behind? So when you look at the people's aspect, you find that your value for money analysis will move beyond the money aspect, but you are also taking into account these other factors, which can be qualitative and quantitative. But all those have to be taken into account. The other aspect is the project preparation. This becomes one of the challenges. If you don't have funds to prepare projects, your projects are likely to be dead. So we need to come up with what I would call start with low-hanging fruits. The projects that are smaller, that you can use less expensive consultants to do it. So when you do that, it will give you the platform to move to the next project. So I remember there was a time in our country where we didn't have funds for engaging consultants to do feasibility studies. We needed to do a feasibility study for the hostel project. We are doing hostels in the country, but we also needed to do a game reserve PPP. We needed to do a reserve for the oil storage company. But for all these, we didn't have money for feasibility studies. So there's myself in our office, in finance, we have a lawyer, then there is an engineer, and then we had the different contracting authorities, which were the ministries, the sponsoring ministries. And we said, we don't have money for feasibility studies. Are we going to stop doing this feasibility? Let's just do it. So we became the consultants and talk about learning through experience. And for me, I found that to be a very big way of capacity building for our organizations, where we did the feasibility studies, we advertised, now we have contracts. The other contracts are running, some are already building, and it worked. So thinking around the box, if it doesn't work, what do you do? We came up with another plan of getting consultants on success fee basis, where we advertised and said, we don't have the funds, we'll pay you a little bit, but much of it will come when the investor comes. Can you do the job? So that was another innovative way. But over and above, it's important that governments should provide the funding for project development, because that's what unlocks projects going forward. When you're doing your feasibility studies, there are things to look out for. Risk allocation is very important. And as we say, it's the mantra in PPPs, risk is allocated to the party that is best able to manage it. And what it means is that if the risk event occurs, does that party have the muscle, financial muscle, or systems, any ability to fix it? So if it is government, you put it to government. If it is private sector, you put it to private sector. So risk allocation is another issue that matters a lot. And then bankability is an issue, value for money. Those things you have to come up. The bankability, you do it through a financial model. Unfortunately, I was going to present yesterday, but there was no time. But basically, your financial model is just your projection of what you think, to the best of your knowledge, according to the data that you have. What do you think this project looks like after taking all experts' input, from your engineers to your financiers? Everybody should have a look, and now you have to come up with a projection. And now once you project, you bring that to present value to see that what is the value of this project in 30 years from now. So you do your projection. So it's the normal accounting issues. You have your P&L, you have your your balance sheet, you have your cash flow, and that's what will help you in the end, whether you have a positive net present value, where you look at your IRR, and you look at IRR is for those of you that are not in finance, you look at a rate which is above your cost of capital. So that's what will help you with your financial model. Then you test it, you have sensitivity, but anyway, let me not go there. Over and above that, you need transparent procurement systems, ensuring that when you are procuring, you don't entertain bribes, because these are what destroys the confidence of investors, and they destroy the whole PPP arrangement, because you're not going to come up with an objective program if you know that you've received money out of that, and it's not worth it. So it's important that the whole chain of people, decision makers, should understand that it's small things like bribes that would disturb and sell away the whole nation. So it's important that we should have transparent processes, and processes that are stringent, and they can stand the test of time. Investors could be invited, bid opening, and it's also important to engage investors at certain points to clarify what exactly you want. So it reduces your procurement system, because if you don't give them enough information, they'll come up with all sorts of responses that will just take time. So it's important to be clear. What do you want the investors to do? Don't also waste their time. So don't make it too backy unnecessarily, but be clear. What is your evaluation criteria? What are the things that you're looking for? Make that extremely clear, so that they should know that those are the things they should focus on. That's very important, and entertain questions on time. Financial close is one other aspect that delays projects. Sometimes they bid and then they want to go and get the financing from their lenders. It's important that we also have an overview of what potential lenders will come in, and if need be, we can even refer our investors if they are struggling, that try knock on this door. It's important that we close our projects in good time and move forward. And then project monitoring is important. When we are looking for value for money, we should understand that that value for money has to be guarded. It has to be guarded throughout, from project start to the handover. So actually the PPP project starts after close, because you have to monitor that the implementation of the construction period is done properly, but then the service delivery as well. So you need a robust team in government to monitor. That's where governance comes in place. And then public awareness, people should know what you're doing. It's very important. But and sustainability and scalability. When you've done your project, make sure it's sustainable, but you can scale it and do something else in future. And lastly, impact. What we are doing should not just be an end in itself, putting up an infrastructure, but what problems are we solving? What impact are we making? What difference are we doing in our country by having this infrastructure? I just want to thank you so much for your attention.
Can Ms. Odringwala have another round of applause? How difficult is that to really paraphrase in layman's language all about PPPs in the African context? Thank you very, very much for that. For those of you who are joining us live, you're most welcome. This is a PPP conference, a Public-Private Partnerships Forum Africa conference here at the Kampala Serena Hotel. We have many dignitaries from around the world. We also have various representatives from government. A special thank you to Honorable Minister Bahati from the Ministry of Finance. You're here. Thank you so much for coming, sir. Also, we can see Honorable Minister of Disaster Preparedness, Musa Chweri. Thank you so much for being here. I also saw Mr. Robert Kabshenga walking in shortly. Thank you very much for being here. Honorable Ministers, yesterday we had a training, and that training was intense, and the room was filled, and people were here to imbibe the knowledge of public-private partnerships and how important they're going to be in Africa. And of course the theme says, Africa's next big thing. And you know what they say, sometimes it calls upon a generation to be great. And we believe that in this fourth industrial revolution, it is Africa's time to be great. And we can do that through PPPs, and we can do that through many other things. In all industrial revolutions, Africa was not ready. But this time, certainly Africa is ready. You've already heard from Council Bernard Owundo, who is an expert here in Uganda on PPPs. We've also had an experience from Ms. Audrey Mwala from Malawi, who's also shared her experience and expertise in PPPs from Malawi. At this time, I'd like to call upon Senior Counsel Nicholas Echimo from Sebalulule and DLA Piper. I know you're in the room, Counsel Nicholas. If you can come up here, please, and explain to the honorable ministers and all our dignitaries here, and also various delegates, about PPPs, where they're going to take Uganda, how important are they to Uganda, and are they really Africa's next big thing? For those of you who are following us on social media, you can do so. Hashtag PPP Forum Africa 19.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Honorable ministers present, various dignitaries in your respective capacities. I didn't know that Jen would do that to me. Maybe I should have stepped out for a break because I was behind and hiding pretty well. PPPs are a subject that are dear to my heart. Spent 19 years as a lawyer, and out of those 19, I have delivered a pretty number of projects. And indeed, it's the next big thing. We understand that demands for social services and other services are growing every single day exponentially, and the government purse never grows as quickly as the demand requires. So what do? We have a lot of private sector operators and players and financiers who would always want to look out for these opportunities. I think getting the right mix as to what the private sector can do to bridge the gap is always very important. And we have a lot of examples where the private sector has partnered with government and delivered on state-of-the-art infrastructure. I had the opportunity probably 15 odd years ago to work at the privatization unit, and I know that working together with the private developer and with government, we were able to deliver the refurbishment of the Serena Hotel. What you see never used to look like this at all. And I agree entirely that how you structure the return to the private sector determines whether it's actually going to be acceptable or not. We've worked on projects where, midway government always becomes wiser and decides, no, I think you've taken us for a ride. So I think that, we're in the right place as Africa. I honestly believe that once we have our act right, which normally starts with having the regulatory and policy environment correct, it always helps to know the rules and to stick with the ground rules. My colleague Bernard, whom I've worked with on many projects before, actually said here very clearly, people need to trust the fact that if they come to the game, on the 45th minute, you're not going to change and move the goalpost to a different direction. And that is very key. Some of the projects that we've seen in this region, I worked on cross-country projects between Uganda and Kenya, tend to falter because people start feeling that the rules have changed probably midway the game. Sometimes things as basic as timelines. It is okay for me to know that we're going to procure this project on PPP basis. I should have a sense as a private developer that it's going to take me 12 months or 16 months or 18 months to be able to get to the finishing line. If I don't have that sense, I always go into panic mode. You start feeling that, has somebody seen the person who is procuring on the side? Do I stand a chance? So we need to be able to actually give ourselves timelines, communicate. If you are running a project like Bernard talked about the Kampala-Jinja Expressway, how much information are you giving back? What feedback are you giving back to the people you're trying to court to do this project for you, so that they have a sense that actually they know what is happening? If that is not in place, you will always have challenges with people feeling that you've shifted goalposts. I think at this point that is all I can share. We have a lot of projects that we can actually tick off and say yes, it's been done. Some of them were done actually back in the day without the legal framework being in place. Today you have the rules, they are properly written down. People know that we'll enter at this point and we can exit at this point. It gives you a lot of solace. Then you have to bring the Contract Act, all kind of regulatory rules to be able to actually deliver a project. And we have so many. We can talk about Bujagali, we can talk about Tororo Solar, we can talk about Access Solar in Soroti, which have all been successful projects that we worked on. and we've seen the government really support the projects as well. So it's really speaking as a Ugandan practitioner, we can say that these things happen, and they can actually happen pretty quickly, depending on commitment and the kind of people who are on the other side of the negotiation table. All I would say is that let's take a learning from each other. What has worked in your country may not necessarily work in my country. What has worked here may actually be replicable in your country, and we'll be happy to share those ideas. With those few remarks, thank you very much. If I have an opportunity, I'd be happy to share. Thank you. And thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very, very much. That is Council Nicholas Ichimu for those very wise words. Why it's very important for you to be in this ecosystem, in this space, is because a lot of our speakers are very experienced ladies and gentlemen when it comes to the public-private partnership ecosystem, and you can learn a lot from them. Since the morning, we've been, of course, introducing you to a lot of our speakers. We thank you very much for all of you for coming. And this is just a quick reminder. Our theme is Africa's next big thing, and you can see it right there. It's in focus, people first principles in support of UN Sustainable Development Goals. Well, shortly, our chief guest, His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, shall be in this forum. He shall be also flanked by the African Union Head for Infrastructure Development, former Right Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, and now in his new docket as African Union Head Infrastructure Development, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. And of course, they shall be led through there, or through there, depending on where security decides, right up to the stage. His Excellency shall sit in the middle, and he shall be flanked by those principles I've talked about. We shall then stand for the national anthem. That's the national anthem of Uganda, alongside the East African national anthem. And thereafter, we shall have a prayer by Mr. Peter Chapesa. In terms of regional cooperation, Mr. Peter Chapesa is from Kenya. He shall say the prayer for us today. Yesterday, Bishop Oyet said our prayer, and we thank them very much for that. And then thereafter, let me take you through the program. We're going to have Dr. Agnes Appiah Atim. She'll be presenting some of the projects to show the value addition already caused therein. The project shall be agri-led that she'll be presenting. And thereafter also Beatrice Flora Ikelai, who is behind this conference, shall also say a few words. And then thereafter we shall have a Right Honorable Raila Odinga. He shall make his presentation on infrastructure development. Then we shall have Honorable Bahati, David Bahati from the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and he also is Minister of State there in charge of urban planning. He then in turn shall invite His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, to address this fora, and thereafter, of course, to declare this conference officially open. And then, of course, thereafter we shall continue with our plenary session. We shall then have the necessary presentations. We will be talking about global state of PPPs, why PPPs fail, lessons from international, regional, and national experience. And then after the break, we shall have the topic, creating a network of PPP units and practitioners, its role and why it is important for Africa, why an African approach is certainly needed. Let's take this opportunity also to say a special thank you to our sponsors, Operation Wealth Creation. We have to also make a special mention for Chira Motors Corporation, and also for DBSA. DBSA is the Development Bank of South Africa, alongside many, many others. At this juncture, I'd just like to ask those who are our key sponsors to say a few words. Remember, time is not our best ally this morning, so we have to be very prudent. I'm just going to give all these sponsors at least 1 minute each to sell their brand. And for those of you who are joining us, for those of you who are joining us live on television, you're most welcome. For those of you who are joining us live online, you can also follow us on our hashtag. That's hashtag PPP Forum Africa 19. So without further ado, can I kindly have a representative from Operation Wealth Creation for just 1 minute alone, and a representative from Chira Motors, if you can get ready, and also a representative from DBSA. 1 minute each, please. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It would be unfair not to respond to OWC. OWC is Operation Wealth Creation, which is a special program initiated by His Excellency the President in 2013. It is predominantly run by uniformed men. Some of you are here. Can you stand up? There are generally few women, and I happen to be one of them. Kataike Sarah is my name, and I'm a director for policy and planning. We are so privileged that we've been part of this organization of this high-level PPP. I've been advised to stop here. I'll continue when another opportunity comes. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we all rise, please? We welcome our chief guest, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda. You can receive a round of applause, please. Here at the high-level inaugural PPP Conference 2019, Public-Private Partnerships, Africa's next big thing. His Excellency President is greeting various participants, various delegates. He's also flanked by the Minister. Of course, a special welcome to African Union Head Infrastructure Development, Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga. They're all being taken to the stage. Protocol is kindly assisting them. Our dignitaries remain standing, please. Your Excellencies remain standing. Ladies and gentlemen, can remain standing here at the Kampala Serena Hotel. The anthems, please. We shall remain standing, please, for a prayer. The prayer shall be said by Mr. Peter Chepesa. Mr. Peter Chepesa is from Kenya, to show that we have some solidarity.
Thank you, my sister Jen. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, in the mighty name of Jesus Christ, it is encouraging to have you, Father, who created heaven and earth. You created man in your likeness and image and gave him authority over the heavens, over the earth, and over the waters and everything underneath. Father, you put wealth under the disposal of man. We thank you, Father, because of this moment that you have united us together in this PPP conference. We pray that you give us wisdom to use the wealth that you have given us, Father, to enable us live in dignity, to live in grace and to live in decency. I pray that, Father, you bless the President of the Republic of Uganda, His Excellency the President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Bless him and his family, and bless the leadership of Uganda. Bless them with good health and wisdom, so that, Father, as they live to serve Ugandans, Father, may they have plenty, may they have peace and prosperity. Thank you, Father, because of Raila Amolo Odinga, Right Honorable former Prime Minister of Kenya. Bless him, Father. You have made him great in Africa. Father, grant him good health and strength to continue championing for justice and truth in Africa. Bless all leaders who are here in their different capacities, and particularly Sister Beatrice, who has enabled us to gather here together. Father, bless her and all PPP members so that we realize the dreams enshrined in PPP. Thank you, Father, because of this conference. May you grant us good health, may you grant us wisdom, and may you grant us, Father, knowledge that we may share what is important that can help us to prosper together as a people in the world. In the mighty name of Jesus Christ, I pray and believe. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may kindly take your seats. Your Excellency, Mr. President, welcome to the high-level inaugural PPP Conference 2019, Public-Private Partnerships, Africa's Next Big Thing. Our delegates, if you can extend a handshake to the person next to you and say, Karibu Uganda. Say, Karibu Uganda. Uganda is the most beautiful country in the world, and really, it has beautiful people, beautiful landscape. So if you've certainly flown from around the world and you're here, you're not just in good company, you're in a very, very beautiful country indeed. The PPP has been the talk of town, that is the Public-Private Partnerships Conference, especially this one, the high-level inaugural PPP Conference 2019. It has been the talk of town in every single media outlet. However, there has been one story that has been bigger than the PPP, and that has been your birthday, Mr. President. At this juncture, let us really have a handshake and happy birthday, Your Excellency, Mr. President. For the sake of time, let me call upon our first speaker. Dr. Agnes Appiah-Atim is going to talk about Local Government Finance Commission and the project AgriLed. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm round of applause to Dr. Agnes Appiah-Atim.
Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, Excellency, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, and now the Representative for Infrastructure Development in Africa, Honorable Ministers present here, the Deputy Director Operation Wealth Creation, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Dr. Agnes Appiah-Atim. I'm the Chairperson of Local Government Finance Commission, and I'm here to talk on behalf of the local government sector, but also to appreciate the partnership that Operation Wealth Creation has introduced in the local government sector. In that same note, I would like to recognize the local government representatives here, particularly the Wakiso District local government. You're welcome. I would also like to, in a special way, recognize the presence of Operation Wealth Creation in the room. These are the ladies and gentlemen who have made all this possible. Your Excellency, my presentation here today is to basically engage the PPP experts in a little bit different concept of what PPP actually means for us, the local governments. Can I have them? Oh, I didn't see that. It doesn't work. Yeah, so my presentation is basically to set the pace of why we are here today. I would like to apologize for my colleagues of the experts of PPP. I am an expert in rural development and a rural economist. So my critique will be basically because of my area of interest. Meaning that as we talk about the conventional principles, I agree with all the principles, but as local government and OWC, we really want to see how does these PPP principles actually make sense in the life of the majority of our people. And I call that demystified PPP and the success factors that we have as a country, Uganda. One of the things that we are working on is how to regionalize our development in terms of the regional-based approach of partnership. So as we talk about partnership, I know the experts are looking at the big infrastructures, the energy, those are really good, but my focus is how do we demystify that so that the big infrastructures make sense for the rural person. And as a result of that, in the local government and at Operation Wealth Creation, we actually only don't look at the PP, but we include the communities and the producers as really the household, which is a production unit, who is a key partner in some of these PPP space that we are looking at. But also, we also believe that for us to maximize the return on this public investment, as a country, our Ministry of Finance has just launched a program that we call the Public Investment Management for Agro-Industrialization. And we believe that this strategy will help us, will help our bigger majority of the population achieve or benefit from the big infrastructures that we are doing. In fact, as a country, yesterday I was discussing with some of colleagues during the meeting time that through the wise leadership of our Excellency is that by establishing the OWC, in my rural view, is that was an indigenous PPP, where the country, the government is using its military to go and partner with the rural person who does not know where the highways are, to give them the incentive of inputs so that they can produce and process and sell and make profit. So in my view, I think as a country we have an indigenous model of PPP that I would invite my experts to come and learn with me, and we write a book on that. And because of that political will, the country is developing programs such as agro-industrialization for local economic development. That is being championed by the Finance Commission, the Ministry of Local Government, and Ministry of Finance, as well as OWC. So His Excellency is present, and our invited guests, that in my view is actually a rural way. If we are to look at PPP, that means, that make meaning to our people, then we should be looking at that way of understanding PPP. I think this thing does not work. So as a country, as we demystified the whole concept of PPP, we've come up with a menu. And this menu was driven by His Excellency tour in this year from May, where he went all over the country telling us about the 4 sectors that drive wealth and employment in the country. So I would like to invite again my colleagues that This book is available. You can read and understand the indigenous definition of PPP from Our Excellency. And I would really like to thank His Excellency, the President of Uganda, for demystifying the whole conventional way that we look at PPP. And in these sectors, we have agriculture. Agriculture is a main drive for us as a country, but also for the rest of the continent. That as we think about all this infrastructure, who are the people going to use the infrastructure? In one of his tours in my region, he actually communicated to our people in the local language that we have much, we have yo, but we need teach. And that literally means that he has put a lot of effort in having at least some infrastructure in terms of roads, in terms of electricity, but is mobilizing the country on how to use these infrastructures to make it work. So as a country, and as OWC and the local government fraternity, we present to you today our menu. That as you think about the big ones, think about the people who are going to use that. And so agriculture becomes one of the critical areas that we are mobilizing the private sector to take a lead, to engage with our communities so that we can deliver the private sector kind of investment that works for our people. The other thing that we see at the local level is agro-industries. And we believe that if 68% of our communities, of our people in Uganda, who are outside the money economy, are not mobilized and hooked into the value chain of industries and agriculture, then all the discussions we are having in this room will remain here. And I would like to urge you that let this simple rural-based menu drawn from the country tour of Our Excellency the President be a part of the discussion of the PP concepts and the conventional concepts and principles that we are talking about. The other thing that we are looking at is the service sectors. And all these service sectors are some of those things that would then make the discussions we are talking about meaningful. And through his wisdom, His Excellency has actually gone ahead to look at the informal sectors and grouping them into about 20 sectors, including ladies, young people who are in the saloons, those who are repairing the motorcycles, the borders. So that is how innovative and indigenous concepts like this should be viewed in the context of our country. The other aspect is the innovations. Yesterday during the training, we had just a tip of our young people who are already working on the Kira motors. And I think all of us were amazed. During lunchtime, we saw what is happening in the country. And this is nothing else but the vision and the direction that our president is giving us. So I would like to explore all the participants here that as we think about all these concepts, let's think about where we are coming from and where the communities are in all the discussions. So these are really our menu. But of course, we don't forget the infrastructure. And as I said, as a country, we are making very steady progress in terms of infrastructure development. We are there, but not yet there. And that is why you're here. And so we invite you to join us in this journey of looking at how to improve on what we have or develop new roads, fix our rail transport and our water transport. And all these discussions, yesterday again we had a briefing from Right Honorable former Prime Minister telling us that as Africans, I think it's a high time we start mobilizing resources within ourselves and let us stop begging. And as we talk about PPP, let's forget about expecting people to come from somewhere else to do for us, because we have the resources to do it. And I was privileged last night to hear a brief from Right Honorable former Prime Minister telling us actually how we can mobilize our own money. And as a chair of the Finance Commission, they are doable. We have these monies. And yesterday we also had a presentation from the bank from South Africa. They are not from EU, they are not from these big banks, they are really homegrown. And they were giving us solutions, telling us how they are doing it in other countries. So infrastructure remains in our menu, but our priority are actually the rural ones to make meaning in the lives of our people. As a country, mining and energy is a big thing. We've not gone very far yet, but we're really making very good progress in that direction. So mining and energy remains one of those items that are on our list for PPP engagement. And as a local government, we appreciate that all this happens within the local government areas. And so we are very privileged to be part of you here, to bring for you the voices of the majority of the people, the 68% whom we live with on a daily basis at the local government. And of course, we are mindful of the cross-cutting issues. We are mindful of the environment and climate change. And our President, His Excellency, has been championing how to conserve our environment. And we're very mindful that as we talk about all these concepts, let's be mindful about our environment, but also the idea of inclusivity and sustainable growth. And on that note, as a country as well, and Operation Wealth Creation, we are moving into research and development to engage the research fraternity that is the university. And I would want to commit to our distinguished guests that this conference is not in vain. As Operation Wealth Creation and Local Government Finance Commission, we are taking it to another level, and we are organizing an investment expo in Rwenzori region. Why Rwenzori? Because the chief coordinator of Operation Wealth Creation, General Salim Saleh, was there for the last 1 year, trying to understand how development actually means in the lives of the 68%. And on that note, we develop a program which has a public sector financing component, but also a private sector financing component. And that private sector is why we are going to Rwenzori, to invite all of you to come and look at what the country has. And that is a concept of now moving discussions from the conference rooms to going and seeing the real projects where they are and meet the real people that you need to partner with. If it is government, you're going to find government there, the local government. If it is the community, they have their land. We have communities in this country that has over 10,000 acres of land, and they're looking for partners. And in our perspective, that is PPP. The farmer gives you the land, you bring the money, the government regulates, and then the business starts. So we welcome you to the region. And we are going to have trainings for our community this time, not the experts. And we hope that the experts will give us some ideas to include in our rural PPP concept so that we train our people. We have mountain climbing for those who like that. And we shall have a tourism festival. And of course, the expo will have different kind of activities. It may not be a conference setting as we are here today, but a more business oriented. On that note then, I would like to once again thank you very much, Your Excellency, and Your Excellency, the former Right Honorable Prime Minister, for gracing this occasion. And to all our distinguished guests, we want to welcome you to Uganda, and once again welcome you in November at Mountain of the Moon University. I thank you very much.
Can Dr. Agnes Appiah have a better round of applause, please? It's great to see the work that they are doing. At this juncture, I would like to call upon Ms. Beatrice Flora Ikilai. Ms. Beatrice Flora Ikilai shall talk about the high-level inaugural PPP Conference 2019. the Public-Private Partnerships Conference and Africa's Next Big Thing, and of course the theme in focus, People First Principles in Support of UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you very much, Jane. I thank Your Excellency for coming here. I can't believe you're here. And for that reason, I request everybody to stand up. Your Excellency, I can't believe you're here. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, His Excellency, the former Right Honorable Prime Minister, and the African Union Head for Infrastructure Development for Africa, Right Honorable Raila Odinga, Honorable Ministers present in the room from Kenya, from South Sudan, Nigeria, Uganda, members of the Diplomatic Corps, Development Financial Institutions, Operation Wealth Creation. Your Excellency, Operation Wealth Creation has stood with me up to this point. I thank them so much for being here and for fighting a good fight. Our distinguished delegates, speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I'm greatly honored to be here. I'm greatly honored to be speaking here, and I'm greatly honored to have my country host the first inaugural infrastructure event in Africa, public-private partnerships, Africa's next big thing. Your Excellency, this conference comes here because everybody is saying Africa is a good continent. Africa is a wonderful continent, but we agonize with limited or no infrastructure. So I say, how long shall we go saying Africa is a good continent? What do we need to do as Africans? So this conference, Your Excellency, comes here basically to bring African governments in the room for us to think through solutions on how best to bridge the Africa gap that we have in the continent. I'm also honored to have in the room Right Honorable Prime Minister, who greatly accepted to come and be one of the guests of honors after my invitation. Also in the room, we have the President of the African Development Bank, who really wanted to be here, but he's represented by the country manager of the African Development Bank, because African Development Bank is responsible for overseeing infrastructure development in the entire continent. So we are greatly honored to have them in the room. I don't have much to say, but just to thank the President for being here, because that is a great honor for me as a Ugandan, as an African, because Your Excellency, Uganda is the first to host this event, and Nigeria has come forward. They will host the next Africa event, whereby we are just looking at solutions for Africa on how best to bridge the infrastructure development. I thank the speakers who have come, Your Excellency, from Africa and beyond. And I want to take this opportunity to introduce them one by one. When I mention you, please stand up for recognition. Of course, I'll not mention the Right Honorable Prime Minister is already here. Representatives from the African Development Bank, spearheaded by the country manager of the African Development Bank, Kennedy Mbekeni. Please stand up with your team. From Nigeria, we have African Development Bank is in the room. From Nigeria, we have a delegation led by the Director General of Infrastructure Regulatory Commission, Concession Commission, and who is also the co-president of the Africa Public-Private Partnership Network. That is Engineer Chidi Izuwa, Senior. So Your Excellency, Engineer Chidi Izuwa, together with myself, we are the co-presidents of the Africa Public-Private Partnership Network. We are thinking through solutions of how best to bridge the infrastructure gap. And today we have the honor to have you, together with the Right Honorable Prime Minister, launch this Africa Public-Private Partnership Network, whereby it brings together different Africa experts in PPP space to ensure that we bring together solutions for bridging infrastructure gap. From Malawi, we have Audrey Mwala, the Director of the Public-Private Partnership Network. From Namibia, we have Elfas Luanda, the Director of the PPP unit. From Ghana, we have Lotsu, the Director of the PPP unit Highway. From Egypt, we have Atta Harura, the Director of the PPP unit. From Tanzania, we have Flora Tenga. And from Kenya, there are two people. There's JP and there's Sarah Njoroge, all from Kenya. Yes. And then we have South Africa. Your Excellency, we have Development Bank of South Africa. This is a bank that is specifically focused on having money for infrastructure development, focusing on Africa. But they want to have a piece to have in Uganda as well. Development Bank of South Africa, are you in the room? Yes. Have I left out an African country? Then outside Uganda, Your Excellency, we have from Portugal, we have Pedro Neves. Pedro Neves is the Business Advisory Board member from the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, but he also holds very many hats, which we can't list them now, but he's an expert in PPP space, in infrastructure, and I brought him here. It's the first time he comes to Uganda. I told him, you have to come and meet my president so that you can help us bridge the infrastructure gap in Uganda, but across Africa. And then we have from Lebanon, we have Ziad Hayek Alexandra, who is the president of the World Association of Public-Private Partnerships, but he's also the vice chair on the Bureau of the Working Party of Public-Private Partnerships of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And then we have from Japan, we have U-Number. U-Number is from the International Excellence of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Bureau of Public-Private Partnerships, but she's a lecturer at the Toyo University, where they basically focus on public-private partnerships. From Switzerland, we have two people. One is Isaiah Motoko, together with Martin Bach. They are experts in law, and they are focused on resilient and sustainable infrastructure. They are here to share experiences on how best we can do resilient and sustainable infrastructure. From India, we have Naresh Bana, who is a member of the World Association of Public-Private Partnerships, and is also very strong a PPP expert. And from from the US, we have David Baxter. David Baxter is a PPP expert and also a senior expert in PPPs, but he comes from the International Excellence of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, focusing on development of resilient and sustainable infrastructure. That is in New Orleans, that's based in the US. And then, Your Excellency, in the room, we also have a team from Austria. We have Jim Weiss from Stroberg. He's an investor they are very expert in the road sector, and they are very interested in infrastructure in Uganda, especially in the road space. We have from France, we have Aegis, led by Perron. They are also investors who are interested in infrastructure in the PPP space in the road sector. Also, we have Japanese investors who are in the room. Please, can you stand up? They are interested, Your Excellency, in the solar space, and they would want to they have something to share with us. And then you have a team from CCC, the CCC team. You have a team from CCC that's Chinese. They're also interested in investing in the infrastructure space. So, Your Excellency, that is broadly the team you have in the room. And I did this because it brings pride to me, but brings pride to me for my country, but most especially it brings pride to me for my Excellency, because I know you're very passionate about infrastructure development. You agonize also with the challenges we have in infrastructure. So I felt it was my obligation to ensure that this event happens, such that we can start a discussion on how best we can bridge infrastructure in Uganda, but also across Africa, because united we stand as one family, and divided we fall, because a journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step And with those few remarks, Your Excellency, again, I thank you so much for being here. This is the event that we have been waiting for. This is the day, and this is the day the Lord has made. And I thank Your Excellency. I thank OWC, led by General Salim Saleh, who is not here, but wherever you are, I thank you so much for standing by me and for believing in me and for believing in this cause. I say this for God and my country.
Can we have another round of applause, please, for Ms. Beatrice Flora Ekilai, as she takes a seat. At this juncture, because we're here really to hear from the African Union Head, Infrastructure Development, the former Right Honorable Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, but now in his new docket as the African Union Head, Infrastructure Development, who is on a mission to changing Africa, because you know, Your Excellency, Mr. President, they say Africa is the next big thing. In this fourth industrial revolution, all the other industrial revolutions, Africa was sleeping. But this one, I think we are ready. So without further ado, we call upon Right Honorable Raila Odinga kindly to give us his presentation. And His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda has been kind enough to ask Right Honorable Prime Minister, former Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, to take the stage there.
I want to say that I'm accompanied here by some of members of my party. I have two distinguished ladies here, our honorable members of parliament, and Honorable Florence Mutua is from Busia County, Honorable Mishi Mboko, member of parliament from Mombasa County, and then we have our High Commission to Uganda, Mr. Ken Kulonzo. I am very pleased to be in the Pearl of Africa. I was telling the other people last night that when the first white man to come, they were saying that he came to explore. They were saying he didn't need to explore, people were already there. They said that he discovered the source of the Nile, but there were people living there. It was called Mr. Speak. When we came to Kampala and went and then to saw the Kabaka's palace, saw the parliament, saw the court, then we went and stood on top of the Mango Hill and then looked down. And then he recorded, he said, I don't think that this thing was built by these black people. So civilization was here before the white man came. So therefore this is the center of civilization where we are. Growth and development started here. That's why it did not become a colony, it became a protectorate, not a colony. So I'm happy to talk to you about this very important subject of public-private partnerships. Our presence here today is an indication of just how things are moving and things changing on our continent of Africa. There is optimism,
in the continent's future and new thinking on how to finance the opening up of Africa and all its regions to business, travel, and trade. It is recognized that Africa is the richest continent on the planet Earth. But then, the paradox is that although we are the richest continent, we are also the poorest in terms of living conditions of our people. We have said that this is what we want to change on our continent, so that we make our wealth serve our people. Our countries increasingly recognize the importance of infrastructure, the economic growth, and are actively exploring solutions to fund the required development. There is a new appreciation by our government that infrastructure bottlenecks will restrict our growth aspirations and are therefore working to provide infrastructure community with strong value propositions for investment. As we seek to develop infrastructure, we acknowledge the inadequacies of the traditional mode of infrastructure financing. To this end, I congratulate the government of Uganda for this conference that is a clear manifestation of the new thinking to align Africa to the rest of the world with regard to financing infrastructure and related public services. And in doing these things, when you're changing things, you need to know that human beings are very conservative animals. Therefore, they will resist change. The cows are used to the way, the path to the drinking place. So long as they remain in the known territories, there's no resistance. But when you try to deviate, you'll find a lot of resistance. And that's the reason why I'm not surprised that there was some resistance to this conference. Because of lack of the knowledge of the unknown, or fear of the unknown. But as I want to say that as a critical gateway to the continent, Eastern Africa needs to position itself to play a significant role in infrastructure financing and development. We therefore need to begin thinking of innovative financial markets, strong legal systems, progressive regulatory framework, and ease of funding for purposes of infrastructure. As you are all aware, strengthening regional integration is identified as a priority and one of the key new drivers of economic growth in the Africa 2063 agenda that we are all committed to. The formation of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the new focus on intra-African trade has created more impetus for more investment in regional infrastructure development. Right now, all the 54 African countries have signed the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. It has been recognized that Africa trades very little with itself. The intra-African trade stands at 15%. The intra-European trade is at 70%. Intra-Asian trade is at 50%. So, Africa is trading more with the outside the world than with itself. Somebody will ask you, because they produce the same things, how can they trade with themselves? The European countries produce almost the same things, and they trade with themselves. That's why there's no reason why Africa cannot trade with itself. But how does Africa trade with itself without infrastructure? You'll ask a question. How does Uganda trade with the Central African Republic? Central African Republic is only a stone's throw away from Uganda. But how do you take your goods to Bangui? To do so, You'll have to put them on a train or a truck to Mombasa or Dar es Salaam, then get a ship that will go around the Cape, along the West African coast to Cameroon, to the port of Douala, and then by truck all the way to Bangui. The French are faster there than you. No wonder they drink Ugandan tea there and Christian English breakfast tea. For Uganda to be able to do that, you need to have infrastructure developed. And that's why AU has identified several infrastructural developments which are meant to open up the continent. You've got the Trans-African highways, the Cape to Cairo, the Tripoli to Cape, Dakar, N'Djamena to Djibouti, which is highway and rail, Dakar to Lagos, Lagos to Mombasa. That will pass through Bangui and pass through DRC, pass through Kampala to Uganda. That one you can now use to take your goods. Then you have got transcontinental high-speed railway lines, which will make it easier for goods to flow around the continent. For example, there is a Trans-African Beltway that will come from the new port of Lamu through Juba, Bangui to Kribi in the Cameroon, creating a land bridge that connects Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean and opening up the interior Africa, which is landlocked, to trade and development. So countries that are landlocked like Chad can hook in, Uganda can hook in, DRC will hook in, Congo, Brazzaville, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria. And that way you connect the interior of this part of Africa to trade. To achieve this goal, you must do what others across the world have done before or are doing today, which is using public-private partnerships to deliver infrastructure and related public services. Traditional public funding sources for infrastructure are falling far short of the investment needs and the necessity to mobilize private funds. To succeed, we need to put and pursue all options for PPP on the table, like contracts for private sector around roads, maintenance services, and build, operate, and transfer or BOT agreements. To date, we lack clear PPP policy as a regional bloc. We also suffer low capacity and lack of institutions responsible for PPPs and clear laws and customs governing PPPs, especially on a regional scale. I want to give a practical experience. I was invited by the current Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, when he was still Premier of the state of Gujarat, to what they call the Vibrant Gujarat. And I went to that conference and met very many people. It was a one-week conference, and saw how they were using the PPP to develop Gujarat. And they transformed the Gujarat's economy to the fastest growing within the Federation of India, over 12% at that time. And several contracts were signed at that time. They took, for example, a 5,000 acre of land that was wasteland at the port, at the sea, at the coast, and gave it to a private company to develop a port. They built a big port there for importation of coal. Then the other companies, the Tata Group, the Adani Group, came to put up power plants. But when I was there, it was so 4,800 megawatts of power, one being built by the Tata Group, another one, the same capacity, being built by Adani Group. A total of 9,600 power plants being built at that place. And they built also a railway line 90 kilometers from the national grid to that port. And small village was transformed into a very vibrant village at that time called Mondra City. And a lot of work was being created there. If you go to Delhi, the city, the airport, international airport of Delhi, is built through a PPP. It's a modern international airport. And several other projects in India have been contracted this way. So what I saw in India was amazing. I therefore took the PPP Act of Gujarat State and brought it to Kenya. I was then a Prime Minister, and proposed that we use this as a template to introduce PPP to our economy. The cabinet passed that it should be done, and it was given to the Minister for Finance, who then took it to the bureaucrats in the government. The bureaucrat manipulated it. What came out eventually was something that was very different from the original, and that was not really attractive to the private sector. So, Mr. President, I would advise you for free, don't allow these bureaucrats to be in charge. They would sabotage it. Because it denies them what they used to. I was saying, I'll give another example, that if as a child you grew up in your own mother's house, and you're an only child, and your father had only one wife, you grow up believing that your mother is the best cook. Until one day you go to go to eat somewhere else, and you find that they are even better cooks than your mothers. So these people are used to just what they have been used to all this time. They don't know that there's another way of doing it. But I want to say that this path is what has actually made India to transform its economy and be what it is today. There's also the problem of the low quality and age of infrastructure, which discourage serious investors from entering PPP deals with us, alongside bureaucratic procedures and fragmented decision making. And we suffer from the all-time old problem of corruption. For PPPs to take roots and work, governments must take the lead and create the necessary conditions and enabling environment. It is the responsibility of governments to plan and prioritize individual infrastructure investments that are meant for PPPs in line with policy targets. This means we need to prioritize reaching broad agreements as a region on what aspects of infrastructure development is to prioritize, whether it is roads, energy, railways, pipelines, waterways, and airports. Success with PPPs requires that we arm ourselves with policy actions from participating governments as well as strong high-level political backing. High-level political backing is critical. The World Bank reports that when the N4 toll road linking the South Africa's most industrialized but effectively landlocked northern and eastern regions of Gauteng and Mpumalanga provinces to the Mozambican port of Maputo were completed, it was recognized as a pioneering accomplishment. For the first toll road concession signed in sub-Saharan Africa, it was also the first cross-border transport PPP and only the second regional PPP in any sector. Most important is that the project was successful because of high-level support that came directly from the presidents of the two countries. Our governments need to work together with the private sector and development partners to establish technical assistance facilities dedicated to the identification and preparation of projects. As a region, we need to develop a short list of well-prepared projects ready to take up on a PPP basis. Luckily, the African Union Commission has prioritized lists of such projects under the Program of Infrastructure Development in Africa, that's PIDA, that aims at interconnecting, integrating, and transforming the continent. PIDA projects are good candidates for PPP on regional scale. The World Bank, in its PPPI report, indicates that Africa is doing badly with regard to PPPs. The World Bank PPI database has recorded only 7 regional infrastructure projects on the African continent since 2000. 5 have been transport projects, while 2 have been natural gas transmission projects. There's room for us to grow in this sector. We must work on limiting risks for PPP projects through adequate project selection as well as fair, transparent, and competitive bidding process. Risk mitigation must also include guarantees that governments will honor their contractual commitments through the project lifetime. Working as a region instead of individual countries could become easy for us to tap into their assets managed globally by institutional investors such as pension funds, insurance companies, and sovereign wealth funds for infrastructural projects. At the AU level, we are now working to try to create an African infrastructure fund. We have found out that there's a lot of money lying idle on the continent. Several African countries have got huge pension funds, huge sovereign funds, huge insurance funds, and so on, which is lying idle, totaling to trillions of dollars. In South Africa, in Angola, in Nigeria, in Morocco, in Egypt, even in Kenya. These funds could be used to be invested as seed money for infrastructural development of the continent. If you only tap 5% of the total of these funds, it will be more than what Africa needs. Africa's infrastructure needs at the moment stands at about $170 billion annually for us to be able to roll out the infrastructure I'm talking about. And it is doable, it can be done, but you need to have the goodwill to do it and the legal framework within which to accomplish it. Finally, there's need for Africa really to come together. Africa has been talking a lot about integration, and this has not happened, but it is possible. The founding fathers of East Africa, for example, were committed to East African unity. I remember Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, may the Lord rest his soul in peace, had said that he was ready to delay the Tanganyika's independence so that Kenya and Uganda and Tanganyika could get independence together to form the East African Federation. It has remained a pipe dream up to today, nearly 50 years later. It is a major challenge to the leadership of this continent, and this region particularly, because we are one people. We were colonized by one colonial master. I was telling the president about my experience as a young boy coming to Uganda with my father. At the Busia crossing border, It was like you were crossing into another farm from one farm. Just somebody there, standing there with a stick, and only the driver produced the driving license and ID. All of us were not asked about any identification, and we crossed into Uganda. That was under colonial government. Today, it is a different story. You find trucks spending 2 days there in Busia and in Malaba. Why should this be happening 50 years later? When we arrived here, there was nothing like currency, because it was one currency, the East African shilling, that was being used over here. And people were working all over. There were Kenyans working there together with the Ugandans. We traveled across the length and breadth of Uganda, from Busia to Gulu, to Tororo, Hoima, Butiaba, Masindi. I was in all those places. We started from Busia, we were in Iganga, we were in Kamuli, we were in Kakira, we were in Jinja, we were in Mkono, in Kampala, all over. This could happen at that time, and it cannot not happen today. Why? We have an obligation to bring these countries together. We should shed our personal, individual interests for the better interest of the people of East Africa. We speak the same language. We understand each other. You've got the Sebei this side, we call them Sabaot the other side. Turkana, the other side, Karamajong this side. You've got the Samia here, Samia there. Teso here, Teso there. The Luo here, the Luo the other side. And also in Tanzania. So what? At that time when they were fighting for independence, they said that we must work together as a people to get independence. And they sang, sisi tusaidiane kwa uhuru, sisi tusaidiane kwa uhuru, Kenya, Uganda, Tanganyika, Zanzibar, sisi tusaidiane. Mr. President, my challenge to you, you are there in the summit. The time is now. Move, if not move with those who are ready to move. Thank you very much.
Can we really have an East African clap for former Right Honorable Prime Minister for the Republic of Kenya and now the African Union Head of Infrastructure Development, Honorable Raila Odinga. Special thank you, Right Honorable. It's very important, the key issues that you stated. Africa getting together, Africa supporting African Union's 2063. We believe in that agenda. We believe in the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement. We believe that the African continent is great. We believe that Africa's time is now. At this juncture, I'd like to call upon Honorable David Bahati, Minister of State of Urban Planning in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, to kindly go up to the podium, come up to the podium, and then invite, of course, our chief guest, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda, to officially open this conference, the high-level inaugural PPP Conference 2019. Thank you so much.
Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Uganda, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga, the ministers in the room, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make 3 quick points before I invite His Excellency the President. The first is to thank His Excellency the President for coming to officiate at this inaugural. Also want to thank the delegates who have traveled all the way from the continent and beyond the continent to come and be part of this important conference here in Uganda. When Beatrice was speaking, she almost shed tears, and everybody knows why she did that, especially those who come from Uganda. Mr. President, we have a small proverb in my language that umukuru araheha agata nyeire, literally meaning that parents, when children mess up somewhere, it's the responsibility of the parents to come and clean up here and there. May I take this opportunity to really apologize for the miscommunication that happened before this conference, which turned away many delegates from across the continent and beyond. As the former Prime Minister said, our annual requirement for infrastructure development is close to 170 billion US dollars, but we can manage to raise 100 billion US dollars annually. The gap between our needs and what we can raise cannot certainly come from governments. It has got to find some other ways of how we can raise this. And the importance of this conference is to find solutions and ways on how we can be able to raise these resources to build our infrastructure, which we desperately need on the continent. Mr. President, in a number of fora, you have said that the growth of a country has happened, and literally the growth of Africa, the economic growth has happened on two accounts. One, the peace and security. Because of peace and security, we have seen, for example, in Uganda, grow factories from 86 factories now to 4,900 factories just in a mere 20 years. The second is because of the participation of the private sector. And I think it is time, as Honorable Raila Odinga said, for us to embrace the free trade area of the African continent, for us to embrace the participation of the private sector. And Mr. President, the purpose again of this conference is to find ways on how we can embrace the participation of the private sector and especially the funding of our infrastructure on the continent. You know better than I do, and I want to take this opportunity to invite you to address this conference and open it officially.
Sit down, sit down, sit down. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister of Kenya, and a long-time Pan-Africanist, and the son of Pan-Africanists. The honorable ministers, the honorable members of parliament from Uganda and from Kenya, the people with money, and the people without money but with ideas. You are all most welcome. There is the word prosperity. The word prosperity. In Swahili we say ustawi wa jamii. Where does prosperity come from? It has taken Africa a very long time. It took Europe also a long time to understand this idea about prosperity. If you read the Bible, you would have known that when Jesus was alive, that part of the world was being controlled by the Romans. It was part of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was controlling all Southern Europe, including, later on, including Britain and the Near East, what is now Turkey and Palestine and Northern Africa. That was all the Roman Empire. However, in 450 AD, that is 450 years after Christ, the Roman Empire collapsed. Those people were taken over by barbarians, people who had no civilization. So it became chaos. For 1,000 years, they were living in a chaotic situation. No government. Then around 1400, you start getting what they call the Renaissance. The Renaissance meant the rekindling of interest in knowledge. People started now wanting to learn again, wanting to know more. That's what they call it, Renaissance, meaning rebirth. It's from Latin. The rebirth of the thirst for knowledge. So the Europeans started coming up. Some new countries, strong countries started coming up, France, the UK, and so on. But still, they didn't know what to do. This question of what to do is not so easy. What should be done? This one is saying this one is saying that. After the Renaissance, ideas came up in Europe. This is Europe. I'm using Europe as a laboratory to check ideas. One idea that came up was the idea of bullionism. Bullion, they believed that if you have got gold and silver, you would become rich. Some of the countries like Spain and Portugal went to South America, killed all the Red Indians there, stole all the gold and silver, but they ended up being the most backward countries in Europe. So that meant that bullionism, gold, was not a solution. Then in France, there was another group called physiocrats. These people believed that agriculture was the source of all wealth. If you wanted to be rich, you had to engage in agriculture. But as you know, agriculture alone cannot create wealth for a country. It was in 1776, you can see how many years it took. In 1776, a man called Adam Smith wrote a book entitled The Source of Wealth of Nations. Where does the wealth of nations come from? And this is what really helped Europeans to crystallize their ideas. Because he was able to say, no, wealth does not come from gold or from just agriculture. It comes from specialization and division of labor, and then exchange. If one specializes in something, another one specializes in something else, and then you perfect what you are doing, and then your product you exchange with the other one. That's what will create wealth. That's how countries like Holland, which did not have a lot of gold and silver and so on, ended up being much richer and more developed than Spain and Portugal. Now, unfortunately, up to today, some of the Africans have not read what Adam Smith wrote. This is another 300 years after so it's now a total of 600 years from the Renaissance of Europe. Some of the African people don't know. That's how you get the people of Dr. Atim, the 68%, who are still only producing for the stomach, what they call subsistence farming. They are engaged in subsistence farming, and that's exactly what Adam Smith wrote. In 1776, this is 300 years ago. He said a primitive man tries to build his own house, produce his own food, look for his own firewood, get his own water. He's trying to be self-sufficient at a primitive level. He tries to be a master of all trades and a jack of all trades and a master of none. That's what he wrote. So therefore, this dialogue is very, very important. And I'm surprised that my daughter had to go in some EGA, which means vita. Vita, sitaki kusema hiyo kwa Kiingereza au wengine wasijui. Huyu msichana amekuwa na vita kidogo. Watu wengine wanapinga mkutano huu kwa sababu hawajui, they don't know the way forward. So therefore, this debate is very healthy because we don't have time to go into a long discussion on the total situation of Africa. Africa, much of it, like even Uganda here, 68% of the people are still in the pre-capitalist mode of production. They don't yet understand the need for producing for money. And especially in a country like Uganda, which is so rich that you can survive even when you are a fool. Being bright is not a requirement here. You can. And because remember, Africa is 12 times the size of India in land area. India is 1 million square miles. Africa is 12 million square miles. Even today, the population of India is slightly bigger than the population of Africa. And this is when the population of Africa has come up dramatically. So this problem of a huge land area with a small population, because the problem of Africa is actually underpopulation, it is not overpopulation. Africa has never had a problem of overpopulation. Yes, all the human beings started here 4.5 million years ago. Even these white people, these are former Africans. And the Chinese, all these were originally Africans, but they lost the pigment of their skin when they went into the cold climates. But the population here remained small. You get a country like Congo. Congo is the same size, about the same size as India. But with the population now, at independence it was only 15 million at independence. You can imagine 15 million people in a land equal the size of India. And with a lot of resources, with a lot of water, with a lot of... So that's how you get some laxity. People are not hard pressed for primitive survival. In Kenya they are a little bit hard pressed because a big part of Kenya is the semi-arid. That's why the Kenyans are a bit more disciplined than the Ugandans. The Ugandans are most indisciplined people. Because they are not hard pressed. You can survive here even when you are doing nothing. You will not survive very well. Hutaishi vizuri, lakini unakufa kimya. Bila watu kujua kwamba umefariki kwa nini. So because the death is not dramatic. Pole tu. So it's really important to meet and exchange these ideas. With the emergence of capitalism, well, but even before capitalism, there was trade. But maybe the scale was smaller because trade was coming from the East African coast, bring some merchandise here and back. But with capitalism in Europe, trade became very active, exchange. So therefore, with capitalism now you have, and even socialism, market-oriented socialism, you now have two primary players. Number one, is the producer of a good or a service. The producer of a good or a service. Number two is the consumer of a good or a service. If you don't have these two, you will not have business. You must have the producer and the consumer. And with modern production, capitalism or socialism, the more the consumers you have, the better. So that's what Right Honorable Odinga was telling you about. The market of Africa, selling in the whole of Africa. The more you buy, the better the business. The producer of a good or a service and the consumer of that good or the service. But the two must be linked by some method. And that's where infrastructure comes in. Infrastructure is the one which links the producer and the consumer of a good or a service. If you don't have, that's what Right Honorable Odinga was saying. How do you sell, how does the Ugandan sell to somebody in the Central African Republic? There's no way of how you can sell easily and cheaply to a consumer in Central African Republic. So this is one part of infrastructure. One part of infrastructure is linkage, transport, the railway, the road, the waterway, the airline. Those are linkages. Of course, you can also have linkage by talking on the telephone. Those are all linkages. And that's one part of the infrastructure. But the other part of the infrastructure is to help you produce in the first place. How will you manufacture a good if you don't have electricity? If you don't have piped water? You need that type of infrastructure. Some of the infrastructure, which is social, what we call, because infrastructure has two broad parts. There is the economic infrastructure, but there is also the social infrastructure, which means the schools, the health, the medical for treating people, and schools for education. So all these together are called infrastructure, whether social or economic. So therefore, now that, because in Uganda here we've been trying to wake up Ugandans, please, become modern. Mtoke kwenye usingizi, muwe watu wenye muundo wa kisasa. Become modern people. Modern people don't live by producing for the stomach only. They live by producing for the stomach, but also for the market. That's why you hear that according to the census, the recent one of 2014, 68% of the population in Uganda was still in subsistence farming. So when you hear that the economy of Uganda is growing very fast at 7%, 8%, sometimes even 10%, it is only 32% of the people who are actually doing that. The other 68% are just sitting. If they were involved, Uganda will fly overnight. But we are trying to wake them up, to wake up the 68%. Now, in waking them up, then the issue that comes is what we call in our language, one of our languages, Olubimbi. Olubimbi. Olubimbi in the Samia, I don't know what they would say. When we are digging in the garden, each person has got his line where you cultivate. In our law here we say katara, katara. So I use that a lot when I'm explaining to my stomach producers, the ones who produce for the stomach. I say, what is the Rubimbi? Kwa Swahili tungesemaje? Ile katara yako unalima wewe, mtu mmoja mpaka juu ya shamba. Huyu Mswahili wa Mombasa anaweza kutusaidia. Wanasemaje kwa Kiswahili? Tutakuja kuweka neno la hapa. Katara kwa lugha yetu ya Luo tunasema katara. Katara. But in Uganda we say Rubimbi. In Runyankore we say Rugezi. So I've been explaining to our people. The government has got its own Rubimbi. And you, the Mwananchi, you have got your own Rubimbi. So that I can be able to wake up. That's what my daughter was saying, that I try to indigenize these concepts to make them more, to bring my pre-capitalist people into the modern age. So, broadly speaking, infrastructure is the Ruvimbi of the government, broadly speaking. And that's what the traditional thinking which Right Honorable Odinga was talking about. The infrastructure has been the Katara, the Ruvimbi of the government. The government is the one to build the roads, the government is the one to build the schools, the government is the one to build the railway, and so on. But the challenge we have is that the government may not get all the money to do this Ruvimbi. So, why not tap in money from the private sector and money from institutions, like he was saying about the pension funds, to do this Ruvimbi? So that is why this conference of ACOCA. And I totally welcome this idea, because in one of your tribes, those ones from the bush, from the other side, there is when you are wrestling, somebody can challenge you to a wrestling match and say, oh, let's wrestle. And once somebody challenges you, you cannot chicken out. You must defend your you must defend your manhood, otherwise. But they also have an arrangement. Those fellows of yours, they have an arrangement where somebody can come in and say, let me wrestle with him on your behalf. somebody will come and say, this man who has challenged you, let me wrestle with him on your behalf. It is called Okunyero Mfunguro, that he has drunk your own cup. Instead of him drinking it, let me drinking it on your behalf. And that one is accepted. And the other man has no alternative but to accept. Because otherwise, if he withdraws now, where will he get a wife in the future? So, although infrastructure is the rubimbi of government, if the private sector can come in and kunywera mfunguro and take over the challenge, it is most welcome. Because remember that infrastructure is really the musingi of the economy. It is the foundation of the economy. That's why they call it infrastructure. It is the musingi of the economy. It is the foundation. So it can be both a foundation, and that's why it's normally done by the government, because it is the foundation. The government puts their foundation, then you, the private sector, you come and put the money-making units, the enterprises. But infrastructure can also be a business. Can also be a business. It is both infrastructure, but also a business. So what this conference is doing is to alert people that a continent like Africa, with such huge deficit of infrastructure, is actually a big center of opportunity for business. By the time we build all, you know, when China was getting out of poverty, the price of cement went up. Why? Because the Chinese were buying a lot of cement to build. If they were in straw huts, they were now building buildings of cement. The price of steel went up. I remember the price of steel used to be $200 per ton. Because we have got a steel iron ore here, which we are trying to develop. And at that time they were telling us, no, nobody will build a steel factory. I said, why? Because they were saying there was a glut of steel in the world. There was too much steel. Nobody was interested in building a new factory. But as soon as China started coming up, instead of a glut, we had a shortage. So the price of steel went from $200 per ton to $900. It has now come to about 500 and something. Now, to build all these modern things in Africa, we'll need a lot of cement, a lot of steel, a lot of copper for the electricity, a lot of products. So it's actually big business. Business in terms of materials to be used, but also business in terms of actual construction. But this is where you need now to be to have slightly more insight. The English language is a poor language. They don't have enough words. I don't know how I can help them, because the Swahili I can help them. Swahili utakuja ku I'm in touch with the Swahili Council of Tanzania. I will also be in touch with the Swahili Council of Kenya kuweka maneno ya huku bara. Huku bara tuko na maneno mengi. We've got a lot of words here inside the continent than wale Waswahili wa pwani kule. Waswahili wa pwani wanahesabu moja hii Kibantu, mbili Kibantu, tatu Kibantu, nne Kibantu, tano Kibantu. Wakifika next one sita wanaweka Arabic. Mlikosa neno lenu, kwa nini hamkuweka? Lakini huko sisi tunasema emwe ibiri ishatu ine itano mkaga mshanu mlana mwezi 10 hakuna neno ya Kiarabu. So we shall nani. But there is a word called bone marrow. The English don't have a word for it. They say bone marrow, the marrow of the bone. They couldn't get one word. Like they couldn't get one word for here. You remember they failed completely. Say forehead, front of head. Why couldn't these people get one word? Sisi huko tuko na neno moja. Also whatever. So there are some elements of the infrastructure which are really the bone marrow of the economy. In our language here, bone marrow, we call it Musomyo in Uganda. Musomyo in Uganda. Now, these ones, because if you get the cancer of the bone marrow, it's very serious. It's called leukemia. You are in trouble. It's really a big problem. I think these days I hear there is bone marrow transplant and all that, but in the past it was a very big problem. So there are certain parts of the infrastructure that I would want you to deliberate on very carefully. If the private sector is to fund them, then they must be ready to fund, to not to be greedy for high profits, or to expect payment back quickly. Because here we have that problem with Bujagari hydropower station. It was developed by the private sector. Other dams are built by the government, but Bujagari was built by some private people. But because of the way they wanted to recover their money quickly, and my people had not been careful in the negotiation, when the dam was finished, what was the cost of power? 13 American cents. Whew, 13 American cents without subsidy. But 13 cents per unit. Yes, it's good for nightclubs. Nightclubs, they can pay 13 cents, there's no problem. But a factory, to pay 13 cents per unit, it will not make money, it will collapse. So, we got into a problem. Up to now, we have not resolved it, because the government had to come in and now subsidize, so that the power is 10 cents per unit. But even that one was still high. So we have now been looking for how to refinance, to pay off the other people, and we get cheaper money. And yet the other dams of the government, Isimba, their power is 5 cents per unit, American cents per unit. The one of Karuma is 5 cents per unit. Our old dams, the old dams, those are 1.5 cents because we have already paid all the debts. So the one distorting the power tariff, the power price, is this Bujagani. So here we have two options. Now, that is the power. But for the road toll, if you build an express highway from Kampala to Jinja, and you have a road toll to collect money from the rich Ugandans, I'm not bothered how much you charge them. If they are overcharged, if they don't want, let them go and use another road. There I will have no problem at all. They can charge anything to recover the money on the road toll. But for the power, I think there we need to either do public or private with a clear understanding that the time of recovery is a long one, and that the profit internal rate of return should not be too high. That is for power, electricity. This is my experience. Please don't make that mistake. Don't make that mistake. The second area is the railway. The railway. Because again, if the cost of transport is high, you are going to be in trouble. The cost of transport for goods. For the human beings, if they are overcharged, then you can postpone your journey. You don't have to go. You can stay at home. But for the goods, the cost of transport must be competitive. Then the other cost pusher, which we must resolve, is the cost of money. Cost of money, the borrowing, the interest rate. Because here, the World Bank came and said, privatize Uganda Commercial Bank. I said, why? He said, because you know, the interest rates are very high. Why are they high? They are high because your people are corrupt in the UCB, the Uganda Commercial Bank. They give loans which are not well assessed, and many of the people don't pay back the loans. There's a lot of default, and because of that, the few who pay for the ones who don't pay. That's why the interest rates are high. So I said, okay, you take the UCB. We privatized it. The interest rates now are 23% in the Uganda Commercial Bank. So, what happened? Fortunately, the private sector are not ashamed, so they don't even answer me. But fortunately, they came for the UDB, Uganda Development Bank. Say, you privatize this one also. I said, no. For me, I am a bush fighter. When I go to the swimming pool, I first go from the shallow end and see how the ones who are on the deep end are doing. If I see somebody sinking, then I go back. So UDB, I will not privatize it. So now it is the UDB. It is the UDB now which is giving us affordable loans for at least factories, hotels, maybe some type of farming. So those three, the cost of electricity, the cost of transport, the cost of money. Those three. If you don't handle those three properly, I don't see how your economy can grow. Of course, the cost of labor is still low. Cost of labor is still low. That one is not yet a big problem. So therefore, the private sector is most welcome in infrastructure to wrestle with this big challenge on the behalf of the country, but that caution needs to be observed. Certain high cost pushers in the economy need to be ring-fenced. Now, finally, I want to thank, but coming to the source of money. One source of money is that there's a lot of tax default in Africa, like in Uganda. you find that the GDP tax to ratio is still 14% of GDP. That means there's a lot of avoiding taxes. In Europe, in some of the countries, you find the tax GDP ratio is as high as 40%. You can check this. The organizer, you can check what is the tax GDP ratio in European countries and what is the tax GDP ratio here. It is very low. Why? Some of it is the structure of the economy. Because the other people who are producing only for the stomach, they don't pay much tax. But also there is tax evasion. Then how about the money for the minerals? I have said here that in the case of Uganda, money from the oil will never be used for consumption, for imports. It will always be used for infrastructure, some elements of infrastructure, not all of them. So you can also look at the money of infrastructure. The Right Honorable Odinga was very correct, and I also said it at the beginning of my comments. There's no way you can have a modern life, prosperity without trade. And the more you trade, the more you sell, the better. However, he went further and talked about political integration. This is music to my ears. Because I have been here for quite a few years, and I've been telling you people, why do you worship the United States of America? Because it is a powerful country, a big country with a lot of people, a lot of resources, but you don't want to build your own United States. Why do you worship the strength of others, but you don't want to build up your own strength? I cannot follow this. And yet, as he was telling you, which is what I always try to tell you, you are the same people. The lady here from Kenya, Mulen Bemam, we are talking. This is apart from Swahili, even before you talk about Swahili, which is a distillation from the Bantu dialects. But even the other indigenous dialects, they are the same. Kapchorwa, the Bagisu, the Sanyas, the Iteso, the Turkana, the Japadora with the Luo, Kisi. The other day we were having a conference at Munyonyo, and I found a small group of young people sitting. I asked them, I said, what's your name? One of them told me that her name was Kwambuka. I said, where are you from? She said she was from Kisi. I said, what does Kwambuka mean in Kisi? It means exactly what it means in Runyankore. To cross. So, I want to congratulate the Right Honorable Raila Odinga for those brief remarks he made. On this topic of not only economic integration, but also political integration. Because really, leaders have let down Africa for a long time. Since independence, Mwalimu tried, he was let down by some of those players who were around, but he managed to unite, together with Mzee Karume, they united Zanzibar and Tanganyika, and they formed Tanzania, and up to now it is still there. So, you, the Wazukuru, but you have not brought the Wazukuru here, you have brought these are not Wazukuru, these are... Is there any Wazukuru? Oh, a few, just 2 or 3. Wazukuru, Muimire, stand up. Oh, good. Wazukuru means grandchildren. Because our government is a government of grandfathers, parents, and grandchildren. It's a 3-tier government. So those are the grandchildren. Now you're the grandchildren, the Wazukuru. Instead of not combing your hair and looking like fight for the United States of Africa. Because Jaja is in Uganda is grandfather. Jaja Raila has told you. He has reinforced Jaja me that you need to fight for not only the economic integration of Africa, which is for prosperity, because that is important for prosperity, but also political integration, which is for strategic security. Because in the Second World War, the countries which were aggressed by Hitler, most of them were highly developed countries in Europe, like Holland, like Belgium, like Denmark, even Norway, even France was attacked by Germany. They were developed, but not secure. They were developed, but they were not secure because of size. Also matters. Size matters when it comes to strategic security. And it was actually the United States and the Soviet Union which came to defend these highly developed but smaller countries of Europe. So just concentrating only on the economy and forgetting the political integration, where possible, is not correct. So I thank the organizers for organizing this debate. And God forgive those who are sabotaging the conference. Please don't send them into Gehenna. Forgive them, Lord, so that they will repent. And above all, I want to thank the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and the African Union for coming to share their experience with the conference. I wish you good luck. And forgive those who were sabotaging the conference, for they know not what they were doing. Thank you very much.
A hearty round of applause, please, for our chief guest, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda. Your Excellency, Mr. President, before you go, we would like just 4 groups of photographs right there where you're standing, sir. Just closer. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we're going to have a few group photographs, please, if you can come over there. Yes, the first group photograph will be of His Excellency President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, alongside, of course, the Right Honorable former Prime Minister of the Republic of Kenya, Raila Odinga, and of course Dr. Agnes Appiah-Atim, and of course, Honorable Minister, Mr. Honorable David Bahati. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, yes. Okay, so you've heard the 5 principals who stand up. His Excellency President is now shaking hands with Mr. Chidi. Please, all the speakers and other delegates, please, can you come just below on this tier, please? Thank you so much. And also, can we also have Dr. Nakatude Ruth Galawuzi and Wakiso District, the entire team, please? The Wakiso team can come up onto the podium where the President is. That is enough, please. Your Excellency, Mr. President, so many people turned up for this event. The organizers are also part of this group photograph. Okay, at the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. That's the first photograph. Let's have another one. 1, 2, 3. That's the second photograph. Let's have the final one before, Your Excellency, we go outside for a very big group photograph. 1, 2, 3. That's the final one. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please return to your seats? Can you please return to your seats? Your Excellency, Mr. President, you're going to go just back to your chair quickly, and then we're going to play the anthem. Okay. And Your Excellency, Mr. President, is also going to sign the APPN, that's the Africa Private Partnership Network, and that is being launched today. Can we have the banner come on stage, please? Right next to His Excellency the President is Mr. Chidi from Nigeria, and he's also being, there you go. His Excellency the President is now signing the APPN. And also, can we also have Operation Wealth Creation as well, also to be part of that group photograph there? Operation Wealth Creation, please. Let's go up on the stage. Can we also have some of the other advertisers who've been very close? Chira Evie, please. We see you. Professor Chira, can you come up, please? There you have it. That is the Africa Private Public Partnership Network certificate that has just been signed and launched. And also, can we have Africa Development Bank and also DBSA? Can we have DBSA also, please? Okay, everybody wants to be a part of this photograph. His Excellency the President is signing to launch the APPN. And also, we are also going to ask for WAP to also be included in the next photograph and photo opportunity. And also, we have also DBSA. They're about to come onto the stage as well. So let us wait shortly, please. Let us wait shortly. Remember, there's still a big group photograph to come outside. Kindly just wait just for a moment. Just wait, please. As His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda signs the relaunching of Africa, that's the Africa Public-Private Partnership Network. And also, former Right Honorable Prime Minister of Kenya, Raila Odinga, is also signing as well. Thank you so much. Okay, can everybody, ladies and gentlemen, protocol, security, can you let people off the stage, please? Can we get people off the stage, please? We still have the anthems that have to be played. There's a group photograph that's coming up outside. Okay, His Excellency has gone out. I think we will find our way. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to end this, so let's go all through this way, please, for the group photograph. Let's go for the group photograph, please.